Okay, good evening, everybody. I'll go ahead and call to order this special session of the Auburn City Council, as well as the Planning Commission's joint session for October 12th, 2020. Before we get started, I just want to take a quick opportunity to remind anybody from the public who is watching that we are still accepting public comments virtually, as was posted in the meeting agenda and on our website. We have been accepting both telephone public comment as well as email public comment to the email that you see on the screen, publiccomment@auburn.ca.gov. It is not too late. Our city clerk does a good job of continuously checking that email box throughout the meeting. So if you do have public comment on any of the items, you can do so. And then as we, for this meeting, because it is a special session with the Planning Commission, which we'll bring in a moment, because this is a workshop on two of the elements for our general plan, our housing element and our safety element, there is a Zoom link that was posted on the agenda as well. We may have members of the public on here. For those members of the public that are joining our meeting via Zoom, when we get to that item and when we open up to public comment, we'll ask that you either in the chat feature let us know that you have a comment to make, or you can use the raise hand feature and we will also come to you and we'll bring one by one members of the public into the meeting, allow you to make your public comment, and then we'll put you back in the waiting room. So you'll still be with us in the meeting, but you'll only be visible and able to talk during that portion. So this is the first time we've had a little interactivity with the public, and we're looking forward to that. But also bear with us as we make that transition. So with that, I will go ahead and ask the city clerk to take the roll call of the city council.
Councilmember Dunn Calvillo.
Present.
Amara.
Present.
Councilmembers Mackey is going to be absent tonight. Councilmember Spokely.
Here.
And Mayor Berlant.
And I am here as well. Thank you very much. If you all join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our first item on the agenda is mayor's accommodations, proclamations, acknowledgements, and announcements. And I have a couple announcements that I would like to make. First off, if you had an opportunity to read the Auburn Journal, our own city attorney, Gary Bell, was featured after being named one of the top 40 under 40 lawyers within California based on the Daily Journal Corporation, which is a legal trade paper. So pretty impressive to have Gary named in such a prestigious list. And so Gary, I just wanted to take an opportunity and allow the council to acknowledge and credit your hard work of being recognized. So thank you.
Congratulations.
One other announcement I just wanted to make is if you had not seen, despite the cooler temperatures, the National Weather Service has issued a fire weather watch for Wednesday through Friday due to heightened fire danger. Fire weather watch is the precursor to a potential red flag warning. We're expecting gusty winds and low humidity throughout much of Northern California and our region. I know our police department and fire departments have already posted some information. PG&E has also put customers on alert that there may be some public safety power shutoffs. I have not seen any information or details on whether or not that would include the Auburn area. We have been thankfully left out or we have not been hit by any of the PSPSs or the power outages, but that could change. And so I think it's important that we all be prepared and be aware and also do our part to prevent fire. So just wanted to make that quick announcement for everybody. Continuing on our agenda, the first item here is the agenda approval. This is the time set aside for council members and or the public to ask for the removal, postponement, and or change of a listed sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by a roll call of the council. So I'll first start with the council, see if there's any items anybody would like to change. Not seeing any, I'll look to the city clerk to see if there is anything from the public.
There's not.
And again, for those in the public that are on our Zoom meeting, if you have any items that you want to speak on, please again raise your hand or use the chat feature as well. So with hearing that there is no changes, I will go ahead and turn it back to the council for approval.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of the agenda as proposed.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a first and a second. If the city clerk will please take the roll.
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Spokley,
Yes.
and Mayor Berlant.
Aye. All right, the agenda stands. Moving on to the consent calendar, we have 2 items on the consent. All matters listed on the consent calendar will be considered to be routine in nature and be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a person requests specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. And just to start us off, I am going to remove item number 2, which means there is only item number 1 left on the consent calendar. So I will look to the council to see if anybody has anything with item number 1 that they would like to discuss. Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and ask our city clerk if we have any public comment on item number 1.
No.
With that, entertain a motion for item number 1.
I move we approve item number 1 on the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, if the city clerk will please take the roll.
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Spokley,
Yes.
and Mayor Berlant.
Aye. All right. Item number 2 here, the records management systems applications police department. I merely pulled this item to give our police chief an opportunity to, I think, quickly summarize what it is. I know our city manager included it in his report to the community and to the council this past week. But in my opinion, this is a pretty huge milestone for us to meet. And so I wanted to at least give our police chief the opportunity to quickly, for the public and for our sake, do a quick summary of what it is and what it will entail. And again, at least acknowledge the huge step that this is. So Chief, thank you for joining us this evening.
Well, good evening, Mayor Berlant, City Council members, Ryan Kinane, your Chief of Police. So I am excited for this next step in our technology improvements for the city of Auburn here in our police department. So as we all know, July of this year, we kicked off our new CAD, computer-aided dispatch and record management system. This system actually integrates both parts with CAD and our record management system, as opposed to the old way that we had 2 separate systems that didn't talk. So this is our next step to improve our technology. So first is our citizen RIMS. When I got here, a lot of it from our community was wanting to know what was going on as it relates to public safety, more specifically to the law enforcement side of it. And this application is in addition to our CAD RMS system, but this will allow us to actually start pushing information onto our website, making the data almost real time. Will allow the community to look at the maps on our website to see what's going on. So there'll be different features with our citizen RIMS side of it. It also, one of the things we're trying to do, again, using technology to be more efficient, it'll allow us to do vacation checks, not just via a PDF document anymore, but people will be able to log on, type in that they're going on vacation, and it'll talk to our CAD system. So a lot of great stuff with that citizen RIMS component too. I'm excited for that. And then there's the iRIMS side of it. So iRIMS is another application built on top of the Sunridge CAD RMS system. And it actually puts an application right there on the officers' phones. So the officers will be able to get the information, calls, we'll be able to see those. They'll be able to close their calls out using this. They'll be able to use their phones to create field interview cards. All this information, we enter at one time and it goes right into both our CAD and our record management system. So it's a great tool as we move forward into different aspects, things like RIPA, which is the Racial Profiling Act. So we'll be starting to track the types of traffic stops that we do and other proactive measures. And we'll be able to do it right there on our phone. So again, these next 2 applications are the next 2 steps into our fully integrated computer-aided dispatch and our record management system.
Thank you, Chief. Would you be able to expand for us on what the cost is for these 2 elements? as well as the timeline that residents can expect to see the citizens RIMS portion of it.
Sure, between the two systems, so both systems are combined about $14,000. But what we did was we broke it down into a 5-year lease agreement with Sunridge. So we'll pay this off over the next 5 years. We also pay a maintenance fee to the Sunridge company, and that will continue on to as long as we have this system. So it's a relatively low cost for this, especially as we spread it over the 5 years. And once we start moving through this, I don't have a specific timeline for you, but relatively soon, given the fact that it plugs in right into our current system. So I'm anticipating probably about a couple months before we're live with this.
Great, thank you for that. Any questions from the council? Yeah, Councilwoman Donna Calvillo, go ahead.
I don't have questions, but I do have comments. So I just wanted to
Yeah, that's fine.
lay that ground.
Go ahead.
So thank you.
Go ahead with your comments, it's fine.
Okay, thank you. So I'm very pleased to see this, and I very much look forward to its implementation. One step further towards modernization and accountability and transparency, which are very important to me and I believe to our council as well. So great job on this, and I'm looking forward to the implementation. So thank you very much for bringing this to us.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for the chief?
I'd just like to thank Chief Canan for that research and implementing it and going forward with this. It would be an asset for our city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, oh yeah, Councilmember Swokey, go ahead.
I'll just chime in here, Chief. Long time coming. Thank you for finally getting this up across the finish line. Greatly appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Staff has done a tremendous job. I certainly, a great team over there.
With that, I'll go ahead and turn to City Clerk to see if we have any public comment on this item.
We do not.
Okay, hearing none, I will just final this before we vote. As the chief knows, I have been very critical, may not be the right word, but really supportive of getting this data and this information out to the public and making it accessible. I will note that it is one of the items that the Transient Homeless Task Force identified in our strategic plan to better inform the community of what's happening. And so I think this is a huge step, not only in meeting that effort, but also in just as Councilwoman Donna Calvillo said, the overall transparency that this brings and the modernization has been a long time coming. And so I'm very excited as well. That's the reason why I wanted to pull it off, just so we could, one, give the chief and his staff kudos. For those who have not been able to yet see the new back end of the dispatching system and the records management system, it is state of the art. And if you have not seen Citizens RIMS, all you need to do is go to Rockland Police Department's website, and the Rockland Police Department has this exact same system. And it is incredibly easy to use and has a lot of information. And I will mention that I have also had the opportunity to see the iRIMS portion of Rockland's system as well, and for the officers, and talking to at least one officer from the Rockland Police Department, having all of that right at the fingertips is just a huge sense of efficiency in using available technology. So again, Chief, thank you very much. Appreciate that. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it back to the council for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and move approval of this item.
I'll second it.
Okay, there's a first and a second. I'll ask the city clerk if she'll please take the roll.
Councilmember Donna Calvillo,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Spokley,
Yes.
and Mayor Berlant.
Aye as well. Thank you very much, Chief, for joining us this evening.
Thank
Moving
you.
on to item number 3, public comment. Again, I'll mention that we have been accepting public comment both by telephone and by email, and those on Zoom can also join us by raising your hand or chatting, mentioning it in the chat feature. So I'll turn over to the city clerk for any public comment tonight.
I just double checked it and we do not have any public comment tonight.
I will give one more opportunity for those who are joining us tonight on Zoom to see if there's anybody on here that would like to raise their hand or make public comment. And not really hearing or seeing anything. All right, we'll go ahead and close. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'll turn it to the council for public comment. And Councilman Dowden Calvillo, thank you for kindly reminding me. And so I'll turn it to you to kick us off here.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I was hoping that we could adjourn our meeting tonight in the memory of Earl Isley, who passed away recently, a true pillar of our community, a businessman whose heart really was with Auburn. And so I think that it would be an honor for us to adjourn the meeting in his memory tonight. So thank you.
Absolutely. As you know, and some others, we mentioned this at Medler's last week, a huge loss for us. I echo your comments, and I will be honored to end our meeting tonight in his honor. So thank you for that. Any other public comment from this council? Okay, not seeing any, we'll go ahead and move then to item number 4, which is the draft 2021 through 2029 housing element and the draft 2021 safety element. We'll go ahead and give Amy an opportunity to bring in our planning commission. And since this is also a public meeting of our planning commission, I will allow, when she adds them, an opportunity for her to take the role of our commission.
I have quite a few people to move over, so if you just give me a couple minutes. Okay, I think that covers it as far as staff, PlaceWorks, and the Planning Commission.
Great, thank you. I'll ask Amy if you'll take the role of the Planning Commission, please.
Sure. Here I have Planning Commissioner Hyatt. You can unmute now for this roll call.
Yes, present.
And let's see, Planning Commissioner Willick
Here.
and Planning Commissioner Vitus.
Here.
Absent tonight, I have Planning Commissioner Galliard and Powers.
Great, thank you very much and welcome. And also I'll welcome Commissioner Hyatt. I think this is at least the first meeting that I'm aware of, or at least the first meeting with the council. So congratulations and welcome to the Planning Commission. With that, I will turn it over to staff to kick off our discussion.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, and Planning Commissioners. Tanya Ward, your Senior Planner. Before we hear the presentation from our consultant team, PlaceWorks, I thought it would be good to just get a brief recap on what brought us here tonight. And that really stems from our March 2nd. We had a joint workshop between the City Council and Planning Commission to evaluate the current housing element and safety element and to discuss what changes in state laws would affect updates as well as community needs. The takeaway from the workshop was that the state and our local SACOG will require Auburn to accommodate 310 new housing units over the next 8-year planning period, and of which those 109 will meet an affordability requirement in this housing element cycle. As part of the workshop, public input concluded that there was overall support for mixed use development, density bonuses, high density rentals, accessory dwelling units, or what's commonly known as ADUs, and inclusionary housing that would address the city's housing shortage as we look forward in this element. It was discussed that in addition to the housing element update, that the city's required to update its safety element, and that is to include climate adaptation and resiliency strategies, and as well as include information about wildfire risk in the community, and as well as how to improve wildfire safety and to comprehensively address the short-term and long-term threats posed by climate change. So since we met last, Staff and the consultant team PlaceWorks have incorporated the information into the draft documents that are being shared tonight for consideration. Staff recommends that we receive a presentation from PlaceWorks and discuss the documents and provide feedback in that regard. Staff would also like to note that this will not be the last chance that the group and the public will be able to provide comments on these documents. And if there are any questions on upcoming dates, to refer to the schedule that's both in the staff report and as well provided in the PowerPoint presentation. It should also be noted that these two elements will begin the city's effort to update its 1993 general plan. And I'm going to pause right there to see if there's any questions for staff before I introduce the PlaceWorks team.
Great, thank you for that. Any council members have any questions at this point? Okay, yeah, Tanya, I'll go ahead and turn back to you, and if you want to introduce each of our participants this evening.
Great, great. So the PlaceWorks members that are with us tonight, we have Jennifer Gusselum, we have Cynthia Walsh, Mark Teague, and Eli Crispy. And I think I can't say enough about the coordination that PlaceWorks has had with staff in bringing these documents to you tonight. So thank you very much, and I will turn it over to them. Thank you.
Actually, you know, I'm sorry, I failed to ask our planning commissioners. Any of the planning commissioners have any questions for staff at this point?
No, I don't. Vitus.
Hyatt does not.
Nick Willick, neither.
Okay, great, thank you. I failed to ask you guys, so thank you. I'll go ahead and turn it then back to our consultants. Thank you.
All right, let me share my screen. Is that showing the presentation correctly?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can see it.
Perfect.
All right, good evening. My name is Jennifer Castellum. As we've mentioned, we are the consultants here. I'm going to kick off the presentation and then pass off to Cynthia Walsh to go into a little bit more detail. And then Eli Crispy will give a little update on the safety element. And Mark Teague on our team is here available for questions. He is leading up the environmental effort for the housing and safety element. So we are happy to be here, and it's nice to reconvene with the Auburn Council and Planning Commission. The last time we saw some of you was March for our housing element workshop, and that was the last meeting that we actually saw people at since March. So kind of funny that we're now in October and all getting back together. So nice to see everyone again. I'm going to go over I'm going to do a quick overview of the housing element. And then I'm going to talk about the regional housing needs allocation process, which is driving the housing element update, and then talk about the input that we got from that public meeting in March and some of the other additional efforts that we made, and then give you an overview of the new housing programs once we modified and updated for this next 8-year period. And then, as I mentioned, Eli will jump into the safety, and then we'll open it up for questions. All right, so the City of Auburn's housing element, and I think as I mentioned previously, I have been the author of the 3 of the last 4 rounds of the housing element. So I've been engaged with the group on issues related to housing in Auburn for a while. So for this particular update, you are due May 15th, 2021. That is the SACOG update deadline, and that is to get the city on an 8-year update process. Housing element is unique in the fact that it has to be reviewed, by HCD, which is the State Housing and Community Development Department, and we will submit it for a 60-day review, receive comments upon that 60 days, and bring it back for the formal adoption process. So we're here tonight to kick off, as Tanya mentioned, the public outreach process of the document. Housing element is one of the mandated elements of the general plan, and it is unique in the fact that we look at the existing needs and we project out what the needs are for the next 8-year planning period. And the document is very heavy with demographic information, but the driving force of the housing element is the regional housing needs allocation process. And our goal is to, as Tanya mentioned, to accommodate the city's regional housing accommodation numbers through a vacant land inventory. So we'll get a little more into that. So of the pieces of the document that you saw, the review of previous is basically the checks and balances of the housing element. This is what we look at to determine what has been accomplished in this last 8-year period and what programs need to be modified, what programs need to be continued, and what programs are completed that we need to remove from the document. In addition to that, then we put together the goals, policies, and programs based on that review of previous. But that the document of the goals, policies, and programs, that has to be reported to HCD on an annual basis. So it's important that as we go through that review of previous, we really do a good job of determining which ones should be continued, because the staff will have to annually report on progress to the state. And then the other piece of this document is the public participation section, which includes a write-up on the workshop as well as consultations, and we'll get more into what consultations are. The background of it is the housing needs assessment. And this is what I included as what I mentioned as kind of the technical, the big kind of beefy part of the document. And if you are having trouble sleeping, I recommend that you read this section of the document, and it'll help you get to sleep, because it includes a lot of numbers for some of you who are not number people, but it is a lot of good information, we kid. And it includes the demographics of Auburn as well as the region, and what special needs housing looks like, and what we should focus on for this next period of time. The resources and constraints section talks about what land is available. So in talking about the regional housing needs allocation and what it takes to build housing in Auburn, we look at what governmental and non-governmental constraints are. So how much does fees cost? How long does it take to do a building permit? And then what land is available at what varying densities in the community to accommodate development. It's important to mention that the regional housing needs allocation, while it is a driving force of the housing element, it identifies land. And then the goals, policies, and programs identify programs to help facilitate housing. It is not the job of the city to actually build the houses. So the regional housing needs allocation process. So the state comes up with a number every 8-year period and divvies out that number to councils of governments across the state over the next 8-year planning period. And in our case, for the SACOG, for this planning period, which is 2021 through 2029, SACOG is looking to accommodate 117,000 new housing units. Again, this is that we have to identify land for the development of housing should the market build the housing. So SACOG then puts together a methodology and divvies out a number to the city of Auburn. In our case, the city of Auburn has an allocation of 310 units, which I believe is less than your previous allocation from the last 8-year period. And then this number is divvied up between 4 income categories, and income categories equate to density. And so when we look at the income categories of very low and low, we're looking at a density of 30 of high density. So the state thinks that in the SACOG region, you could be doing 20 to 30 units an acre. In our case in Auburn, we're looking at 20 units an acre. And of that number, we have to identify sites that are available to accommodate housing. In the moderate income, we're looking at a medium dense product, perhaps maybe a duplex, some condos, some townhomes. And then above moderate is everything that is market rate single family. So as you can see, based on and the wording here, projected ADUs is accessory dwelling units. So second units, granny flats, those types of units. So ADUs here is paraphrased. We, based on development trends, we're looking at potentially accommodating 120 accessory dwelling units over the next 8-year period. And based on infill development, which would be areas where there is already housing and there's vacant land, sites that can accommodate housing, there is a potential for 570 units. And then within the Baltimore Ravine specific plan, you can accommodate 725. So as you can see, we are identifying that the city of Auburn has a surplus and you can accommodate all of your 310 units. Showing that you have a surplus is good, because when development tends to occur on any of these vacant sites, if it's not quote unquote affordable and has some sort of deed restriction on it, you wouldn't be able to count it in the very low or low income category. So this gives you a little bit of flexibility and wiggle room with density and development, and it makes things a little less tight. So it allows for good planning to actually do good projects. So as I mentioned, pre-quarantine life, look at that. We're all in a meeting and those pictures, and we had a really great meeting early in March. So we had several stations for some of you who were able to come. Eli is shown here in a few pictures of some stations where he had some hazard maps, and we got a lot of good input. We looked at the safety stuff as well as the housing element stuff. We looked at the land inventory. People were able to come up and comment on vacant sites and identify areas where they felt development could really work and be potential. And then we asked about what the housing needs were of the participants and what housing preferences were. So if you, in the document, you can see a lot of that. So 26 people attended, which was really great. And it was a good meeting, and we had a lot of good input. I'm going to pass it off to Cynthia now, who's going to, oh, this is another slide, sorry. Again, the input that we received is summarized in the document. People preferred single family homes. There were concerns about parking capacity in the downtown region. There was definitely support for mixed use development and opportunities for seeing more mixed use in the downtown. So that was great. ADUs was also talked about to address housing shortages and density bonuses, as well as the potential of possibly exploring inclusionary housing. So all of that summarized in there. Now I'm going to pass it off to Cynthia, who's going to talk about the interview consultations that we did.
Yes, thank you. So as a part of the update process, we completed stakeholder consultations. This process involves reaching out and holding phone interviews to different community organizations to gather input on housing needs, community needs, and identifying any needs for special needs groups such as homeless, seniors, lower income persons, or persons with disabilities. When we conducted these consultations, different questions that we asked were, what were the top opportunities and top concerns for future housing in Auburn? What types of housing do their clients prefer? Is there adequate rental housing and opportunities for home ownership? Are there accessible rental units for seniors, persons with disabilities? And then what are the biggest barriers to finding affordable and decent housing in the city of Auburn? The feedback that we got from these consultations were that there is a lack of affordable options and that the length of wait lists are too long. So Section 8 wait lists are very long. That's typical for all communities. There's a high disproportion between income levels and the cost of housing. They also discussed the potential for partnering with partnerships to develop affordable housing. They talked about vacant and underutilized land and what's available for affordable housing development. The need for homeless services was a high one that everyone was bringing up. And they also noted the necessity of learning from the experiences of this pandemic in regards to housing moving forward. So we also completed fair housing consultations. This is a new requirement that was set forth state law. It's AB 686. And it's looking at fair housing. So we reached out to HUD's Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Division, as well as Legal Services of Northern California. And the feedback we gathered here was mainly, again, the lack of affordability within the city. They also pointed out that some communities are segregated based off of the suburban development. And the most common discrimination concerns were income class, disability, and race. So once we gather all of the input from the public outreach efforts, we look at creating new programs and reviewing the current programs to modify or continue them. You can see where we've incorporated the feedback into the programs. They're noted in the different programs under the bullets. So to allow for additional housing opportunities, the city's planning to create a new historic overlay district. That's program N. We're including programs to increase affordable housing options. The city has included different ways to help with housing discrimination and how to further fair housing efforts. The city's also identified ways to incentivize and streamline affordable housing projects. And last, the city has looked at ways to increase the housing supply for special needs groups. So this slide summarizes the new and modified programs. You can see that program L, B, G, and K have all been added to address new state law. Looking back at the new programs, as I previously mentioned, the city is looking to create the historic overlay district. The city is also creating a web-based GIS portal for housing data. And is working to create pre-approved ADUs, the accessory dwelling unit design plans, to assist with the development of ADUs and cut down the timing on that process. So looking at the programs that are being continued, the city plans to continue to provide funding for affordable housing developments, continue the rehab and first-time homebuyer programs, continue to preserve units at risk of converting from affordable to market rate. The city will also continue to assist with senior rental housing development, provide homelessness assistance, continue to assist with the development of housing for extremely low income households. Extremely low income households are the households that are on the verge of homelessness. And then we'll also continue to provide assistance for persons with developmental disabilities. I'm going to pass this to Eli to go over the safety element.
Thank you, Cynthia. So the safety element, as Tanya noted, is a required element of the general plan. And now under new state laws, when housing elements are updated, the safety element also has to be reviewed and updated. So it is now required that they be reviewed and updated on a regular basis to keep up with new information and new state requirements. The new state requirements that we are addressing as part of this update include updated flooding and wildfire information. We are addressing changes related to weather and climate related hazards. Those have to be included. And as of this year, safety elements now also have to include identification of areas that may face evacuation constraints, specifically looking at residential developments where there may be some evacuation challenges. In addition to the requirements of the state, we're also making a general update to the content in the safety element, just for any new information or best practices that might be available. So really keeping the element up to date with the science and the current community needs. One of the major updates in the new safety element is what's called a vulnerability assessment. This is required under state law. And it is an assessment that looks at the potential harm that various hazards could cause for multiple community groups and collectively what we are referring to as assets. So we're looking at the specific harm that may occur to various populations, as well as buildings and infrastructure, key community services such as public safety, or public health. We're looking at impacts to natural ecosystems, as well as to economic drivers, the major components of the local economy. We're really trying to sync this assessment up with some of the regional efforts that have been going on. Placer County, countywide, completed a vulnerability assessment back in 2018 that they have incorporated into some of their recently adopted plans and will be incorporated into their safety element, which is currently being updated. So we are building off of that wherever we can, but we are also making sure that these assessments are really tailored and focused in on the issues that are of concern to Auburn and Auburn-specific conditions. There are several outcomes of the vulnerability assessment, several issues that we want to make sure get addressed, but these are some of the key results that are worth highlighting. There is a fairly widespread chance of increased health impacts as future conditions continue, and in particular that those are likely to affect persons such as senior citizens, young children, persons experiencing homelessness, the very low income and resource constrained persons, as well as people who work out of doors and are more exposed to some potentially hazardous conditions. Electrical transmission lines are highly vulnerable to wind, wildfire, and a handful of other hazards, as are limited access roads, roads where there's really only one way in and out. Those are at risk of being cut off from some of these hazardous conditions. The conifer forests that are around Auburn and are really critical to the community, they face risks from various forestry pests and diseases. There's also the continuing threat, as I'm sure many of you have noticed, from drought, from extreme heat, and of course from wildfires. Wildfires are expected to be the most harmful and sort of widespread weather or climate related hazard that is expected to occur in and around Auburn. Certainly a topic of concern, followed by issues of extreme heat and severe storms as well, and the flooding and landslide risks that come with that. In the safety element, we do address a variety of topics. Again, some of these are mandated by the state. Some of them are topics that we have added because they are reflective of specific conditions in Auburn, and we want to make sure we are practicing good planning. We are trying to prepare not only for acute hazards, specific hazards or natural disasters that sort of occur in a specific moment, but we're also trying to be mindful of any long-term changes and any more chronic hazards that may impact the community, such as drought, for example. And that is everything I have on the safety element, so I will turn it back over to Cynthia. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Eli. Okay, so looking at the schedule, you can see that we started back in January preparing the admin draft. Then we held our stakeholder meeting in March, as we went over earlier. We've been preparing the public review draft. We've completed that. And currently we are at the city council meeting, which is prior to the submittal to HCD for the housing element and CAL FIRE for the safety element. Our next steps will be, we are going to allow those documents to be available for public review prior to submittal. So we will submit the housing element in November, and the safety element will go to CAL FIRE this month. That's a 90-day review period, and HCD is a 60-day review period. For the HCD review period, we will have a call with HCD towards the end of the 60-day review, so probably early January, to discuss any issues they may have or comments they need clarification on, to work to get a conditional compliance letter for the housing element. We will then bring this back to Planning Commission and to City Council for recommendation and approval in February and March. And then the housing element will be submitted again to HCD for its certification review, which we plan to do in April, and that's a 90-day review timeframe. So now we will, I'll pass this back over to Tanya.
Great, thank you. So at this time, now that we've completed received the presentation, I would like to ask the mayor if he would like to introduce the comments. Or if maybe if Amy is there, we could bring those public comments in or open the discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tanya, and thank you, Jennifer and Cynthia and Eli. I want to start, if we can, with city council comments before we get to public comments. Is that okay, Tanya?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sounds good.
If we can minimize there we go. Thank you. And I know it's a big Hollywood Square board tonight, but I'll start with city council members, and I'm just going to go based on who I see, and then we'll come to the planning commission and then circle back with any public comment on Zoom. And those watching on YouTube, we'll give you a little extra time to send emails to our public comments at auburn.ca.gov as well. So Councilwoman Downing-Calvillo, I know you're looks like taking notes. Are you ready to go with any questions you have?
So we're talking about the actual housing elements themselves, the goals and policies. We are going to talk about those right now, correct,
Yeah.
staff?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate that. I was able to attend that last meeting in March, and so there was some good discussion there, and I appreciate that. And thank you for all the data. I know that this is a cumbersome process, complicated process, very detail-oriented process. I just had a couple of really quick questions. On goal 3, which is on page 64 of our packet, it talks about the city conserving the existing stock of affordable rental housing and that we would offer incentives for the construction of new affordable housing. And if you could just remind me of the city's process in conducting this kind of sort of the survey of existing stock. I mean, how do we, because I know we were talking about how we basically monitor it and then we contact the owners in the event that they, may be ready to sell or what have you. But if you can just kind of talk about that a little bit.
Great. I can start. I believe there's a couple of projects in town, and oftentimes we work with one of our housing consultants that manages those programs, and she often, I'm speaking of Carol Stewart, she will often reach out to those property owners when those agreements are becoming to sunset, and to initiate a communication on whether or not they're interested in maintaining them and continuing, or whether or not they're interested in selling. And currently, I believe out of the 2 programs, and I think Cynthia, this might come from that vulnerability assessment data collection that we did, that the interest was to continue with longer agreements and maintaining those units as affordable. Currently, there's been no interest to sell the properties, but again, it's been an ongoing communication with those property owners to ensure that the city is able to maintain them as affordable housing stock. So it's more of a communication exercise, just kind of keeping tabs on those agreements, and then, as we update our housing element, pursuing other properties that and property owners that may want to partner with affordable housing projects, either with the city or by standalone.
But what do we do? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But what do we do in the event that they do want to sell? I mean, what kind of incentives are, our financial, we don't have really any monies, right, in the city to provide an incentive. So, I mean, what do we do in that instance? Beg them to, I mean, really, what mechanisms do we have realistically, given our current financial situation?
Right, and I believe that, the financial situation probably changes and fluxes, over the years. Luckily, it hasn't been an issue, but I'm glad that it's being brought up now, because there really isn't a defined program or incentive that would keep people to stay. It's just that I think from the interaction I've had with those affordable projects, that they have an interest in providing that to Auburn, and there's a sense of community. So I think that's what I think in my mind drives these projects to remain in Auburn is there's a sense of attachment to the community and providing it. So, you know, we're going to keep leveraging that community spirit as long as we can, regardless of the funding that we may have available. But maybe there's some programs, or I guess maybe more details we could add, or best practices, but I can't really speak to that situation in particular because it just hasn't come up.
Yeah, you know what, maybe I can chime in a little bit. So if you look on pages 27 and 28, it actually has an inventory of all the affordable projects that are in the community. And it also, most of these had what are known as 55-year affordability covenants that went on to them. Now they are typically operated by nonprofit types of organizations that are out there. The way that we is we start kind of gearing towards where maybe the affordability covenant may come out. Realize that these are business entities. Oftentimes they're looking for financing and things for them to reinvest back into the projects. One of the things that we can do is we can support them. Many of these involve various types of applications that go in for either tax credits, or if tax credits are going to exist in the next couple of years, the state has various funding sources, home funds. If you look at many of the financing mechanisms, there's Cal HFA things. So our ability to support them in those applications, and sometimes what it involves is us probably agreeing to some type of subrogation of our property taxes or whatever to keep it going. So our ability, number one, we've got the inventory. Second, we know when the affordability on these things expires. And three, our ability to collaborate with them to keep everything affordable. Because like I said, most of these are nonprofit organizations anyway, so they need our support.
Thank you. Also, can you talk just a little bit about the city's density bonus program? Because I know that's referred to in a couple different places. And maybe you can just remind us about that particular program. When we talk about it, and you know that we will offer density bonus and other incentives for the construction of affordable housing, specifically. So just a little.
So currently, the density bonus regulations are in the Auburn's municipal code, and just real quickly behind me for reference, but the applicant can choose when they want to increase density, they can request concessions of development standards for those increases. And I mean, that's changes in density bonus law, and a lot of cities are updating their municipal code to reflect it, but we find that it's probably pertinent as we go through the housing element update that we return and take a look at that. Right now, it appears that it's more of elective. It's not necessarily mandatory, is my understanding. It's currently, it's in staff's mind, it's not utilized often as a tool, but it is one that is available to the developer if they decide, you know, they want to have a concession to one of the development standards.
I just think about, you know, our opportunity to entice developers to build affordable housing. And it is difficult, you know, because we don't have a home program, you know, we don't have advanced fees or what have you to help support future affordable housing programs. We don't have vacant land like the county has had where they can offer it for sale for $1, you know, and so just getting together all the tools that we do have to help incentivize the affordable housing, I think is important. So it sounds like that might be something that, we want to put on our to-do list, maybe to maybe look a little bit further into that then. I mean, outside of this housing element, something, it sounds like what you're saying is right now it's a voluntary, or I don't know. I'm just thinking about trying to be creative, right? In ways, because we don't really have very many incentives. So, it just requires that we think creatively. I know that there are funds that we can secure at the state level now. There weren't always, but there's a lot of people that are vying for those as well. But anyway, thank you. Let's see if I had any other. I know we talk about on page 66, the implementation programs. The city will continue to consider fee reduction or deferrals. And I certainly like that idea and concept. I just wonder about the fact that our fees are so incredibly low. And I think we're required by law to actually collect an amount in a fee that actually covers the actual cost. But so anyway, I think those are all the questions I have for right now. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Council Member Stokely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few questions. There was mention in the staff report and presentation tonight about the web-based GIS system portal. I guess my question is, and maybe this is a question for John and or Tanya, but maybe the consultants, do we have an idea of what that system cost is? I know we've been working on technology concerns. We heard an earlier item tonight about getting our police department, up into the 21st century with their systems. Do we have any idea what this GIS portal system might cost the city on a initial basis and a moving forward basis?
Sure, I could speak to that. So as part of the application for the planning grant to the state, staff anticipated that the upgrade to the current GIS program could be offset, whatever the program cost would be, could be offset by the planning grant. And so I believe we estimated that the new system would, with maintenance and troubleshooting and support, would be around $39,000, but offset by approximately $15,000 to $20,000 based on planning grants, SB2, and also the LEAP grant would offset the cost. So approximately $15,000 to have a new system and the training for staff to utilize the new system, and all of the new updated information and shared GIS from data from all the other agencies.
So thank you, Tanya, for that. I appreciate it, and sorry for the question out of left field there for you. But the county does have their GIS parcel, map information. What are we thinking that this database is going to include? Is it's more than just parcel information. It's going to have rental value. What exactly are we thinking this system will include as far as information?
So in addition to parcel data that we've captured from the county, it also includes important infrastructure that is known to Auburn for our sewer and water lines. Where every manhole cover may be. It also includes zoning data as part of that process, all of the zoning and general plan source, the historic districts, as well as all of the other FEMA related information, what we use in planning in regards to CEQA. So we got farmland mapping, we've got waterways, etc. is included. But more importantly, it's customized for the city of Auburn, in that we can create a layer whenever we want to, let's say, identify a fee district or fees that are associated with the parcel. So it's kind of, it's a living, changeable system that as we update our ordinances or our maps or our fee schedules, all of that can be included in the GIS overlay. Reference to home occupations, business licenses, entitlements that have been issued, etc. The list can just go on and on as we build upon it.
That's very encouraging and very exciting to hear. I hope our cost projections are in line with actual cost to develop something like this. So thank you again, Tanya, for that.
Councilmember Spokley, if I might add, for as dry and boring as Jennifer and Cynthia and the PlaceWorks team think that the appendix to this is, it's a gold mine. All the data that is included in the appendix is all mappable through GIS. One of the things that we're working on right now, and I would tell you before the end of the year, we will have an expanded website, which will link all of this data and this information to people looking. When people are interested in Auburn, they will go and they will start fishing. And the first place that they're going to look at is our website. And all of this information, even if it's simply in data sets, there are a couple of tables that are in the back section of this thing. Simply by having those, they're going to be able to instantly download that information and start mapping all the locations of affordable units in town. Every single vacant parcel is mapped in here, and the ability to correlate those things is right here. So I want to give credit to all the geeks in the room that like data, because it really is the most important part of this whole thing. When you look at this housing element, there's a little bit of meat on the bone here for us to work on some things, but the real important part is all of this data that's been amassed. It's the lion's share of the report. It includes interpretation, but more importantly, the GIS system and the ability to take and do absolute analytics based on Auburn is absolutely right here. So I'll give a shout out to all the data that's in this thing, because it really is getting to what you're alluding to, is moving Auburn into the 21st century as far as our ability to analyze and for people to want to look at us. And Auburn's a great community. This adds to our overall sophistication.
It's about time. It's about time.
John, thank you very much for that. I couldn't agree with you more, and I guess I would fall into that geek category that you outlined there. So I do appreciate it. I'm very excited to hear that we're moving in this direction, because I agree, it's a gold mine, and data in some circumstances is invaluable, particularly if I'm a business owner who's thinking about maybe moving my Sacramento-based business up to Auburn. I need to know things. I need to know properties. I need to know infrastructure, availability, all of those things. So thank you for that, John. I'll continue on my questions real quick here. In reading through the staff report a couple of times, I might have missed it, and if I did, I apologize to the PlaceWorks team. But if I wanted to answer a question from a constituent related to, well, what does very low income mean for somebody who lives in the city of Auburn? Do I just have to run the percentages that were presented? I didn't see a table that said, well, very low income in the city of Auburn is $45,000 annually. I saw the county's very low income numbers and low income and moderate. I saw all of that. And I also saw the table that related the percentages for Auburn compared to the county and how much lower the city of Auburn was than Placer County in general. Did I miss it? Is there a table in here that tells me so I can answer constituents' questions? You know, Matt, what is a very low income household? What is that threshold in the city of Auburn? And I guess maybe Jennifer or Cynthia?
Yeah, typically we provide that on a county level. It's provided by the state. It is something that we can gather on a city-wide level instead. It's just gathered from the American Community Survey. So it has a really large margin of error, but we definitely can include that information, or at least provide it to you if you would like that.
So if I might add in, if you go to page A7 and A8, and then on the page A9, there's tables 5, 6, and 7 in there. If you look at it, you need to do a little bit of math, but if there's a comparison and then a table, and for example, our area median household income is 71% of the county. So if you kind of move that over and start doing math in the other tables, it'll give you a ballpark. Cynthia's right. There's a margin of error that you have to calculate into it. But if we were to have a full-blown program where we work with some of the nonprofits in order to justify affordability of some of the rents and all that stuff, that's where that math comes in. You have to take 5 as a percentage of A6, and then as a percentage of A9, or table A7 on page 9.
So John, thank you. I did see that table A6 and A7 kind of goes down and talks about renter thresholds, owner thresholds, total thresholds. I just, being a numbers guy, table A6 talks about one person, per unit, 2 persons, 3 persons. I get that there's variability in the numbers, but a range, 45,000 to 55,000 for very low. I'm just, people zoom to these tables. I know I do. And I zoomed to the tables and I thought, okay, well, I see the county and what their thresholds are. This is the city of Auburn housing element. Where's the city of Auburn numbers?
Sure.
So maybe just a comment. It would be helpful for me when I'm trying to answer questions from folks that are concerned about affordability in our community, which we all should be. What exactly does that mean? Because the county is different. There are very, very expensive areas in the county, and there, are areas on the other side of that spectrum in the county. But we're the city of Auburn, and this is our housing element. So maybe just a comment to consider. I'll run through the rest of my comments here, if I might. I've got a statement related to the SACOG totals that the city was assigned, but I'll hold off on that. On the safety element, just a quick comment on the safety element. I read through it a couple of times, and particularly as it relates to the fire concerns and issues that affect our community every minute of every day. And in the vulnerability assessment, I saw a lot of different things, and all of those are issues that affect our vulnerability concerns that we have related to fire in particular. But I didn't see any comment about the lack of forest management, lack of lands management for our neighbors to the east. And I'm just wondering why. We spend, our chief Spencer spends a tremendous amount of time going out and finding grants, and it's a continual process for us to gain money for us to go onto our neighbor's property and manage their lands. I'm just curious why, we got climate control, we got all of the buzzwords in our world these days, but I didn't see anything on the lack of forest management or lack of lands management. Is there a reason why that was omitted, or did I miss something?
Yeah, so Council Member Spokley, Dave Spencer, for the record, your fire chief. I don't want to get in front of PlaceWorks and the work that they've done, but I think when we talk about our safety element, I think it's fair to say that it is specific to the city of Auburn. So when you address issues that are outside the city boundaries, I think it provides a level of scope creep, as I would describe it. And so we're really trying to define here within the city boundary itself, not to exclude the sphere of influence. And so that's how I understand the safety element to be written, and I'll kick it to PlaceWorks if they want to jump in and weigh in on that comment.
I would say you described it exactly right. It is focused on the land that is within the city limits and within the sphere of influence, and things that the city itself has control over. So certainly coordination with neighboring jurisdictions on something like land management and forest management is absolutely critical to reduce that risk. And we can insert language promoting that kind of cooperation. But since the land is outside of the city's authority, we can't have policies in here that specifically direct action to be taken around its management.
And thank you, Eli. I completely, and Chief Spencer, I completely understand and agree with that. We're a municipality and we have our boundaries, but it just seemed to me in reading through this document a couple of times that there was references of lots of things that I mean, technically speaking, any property that's within the city limits, we have the ability to go out and tell them, clear your land. And we have the ability to adjudicate that if it's not done in a timely manner. However, our largest threat, as identified in this document, is our eastern boundary. And we don't seem to reference what I think is kind of an elephant in the room. These guys, we need to rely on our neighbors to do their part. And again, I believe that the Fire Safe Council, Chief, you and your staff are spending lots of time and energy finding monies so we can go onto our neighbors' property through the agreements that we've been fortunate enough to get to manage their land for them, so that we reduce the risk to the city of Auburn. So again, Mr. Mayor, I'm done with my comments. That might have been stepping over into the comments section, but I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
No, I appreciate that. And I think we should definitely circle back on that item, because I would completely agree. And I would assume that the others of the council would agree that, we've talked a lot about that, especially for our placeholder friends here. We as a council have talked a lot about that. And so regardless of whether they're within our boundary or not, it does influence us. And maybe it's also listed in the safety element as a constraint since it's not within the city. But I definitely think that some stronger language in the policy component, because that is obviously our number one risk for wildfire. So we can circle back to that at the end if you want, but I just want to put a placeholder for our PlaceWorks consultants that I think that is at absolute from this council. But before we get to that point, I'll bring it to Councilwoman Mara for any questions that she might have.
Hi, yes, I do. So I may have to be switching over to my the safety and the housing element. So, but bear with me, you can hear me. So first, I guess my first question is just a general question. I saw the timeline. Is there a way to speed it up? I know everybody's very anxious. And it's just seems like such a long process. I know we started in March and there's been a lot of things happening, but is there any way of speeding it up, this process? Jennifer, Cynthia?
Sure. Nope. Well, as soon as we get after this meeting, our plan is to move quickly and get it off to HCD for review. But unfortunately, their 60-day review period is all of their 60 days. So they will take that time. So getting through that review and then getting it back to you for adoption is, a high priority. So that we just do have to go through that unfortunate 60 days to get through that. So.
Yeah, and then it's up to us then to try and have it quickly on our agenda so that we can go through the process as quick as possible. Because I know there's been a lot of people anxious about this. Then the other question is, and maybe this is for John, and again, this is more of a general question. I know right now Airbnb isn't really feasible because of COVID, but I think there's going to be a time where it will be. And so this does include updating or changing our, having an opportunity for the commercial individuals to have Airbnb in the commercial zone. Is that correct? That'll encompass this housing element?
Yeah, no, why don't I kick that to Tanya? I know she's been working on it.
Okay, Tanya.
Yes, it's considered as one of the new programs, Program M, Councilmember Amara. It's going to be included in the historic district overlay, where it will allow residential uses to be incorporated within that. So that is one of the residential uses that's being considered as part of this housing element and moving forward. So it would address that. It's not the last step. After certification, then the city would then would have an ordinance and then implement that. But that's something that has been anticipated with our workshops and our work programs. So we're seeing that as a concurrent process, as we also work with Mark Teague, who's on the line, who will be looking at the environmental requirements, the environmental document that will need to support this change into our general plan. So the quick answer is yes.
Okay, so so it's concurrent with this process then.
Right, because the housing element needs to be certified by the state. In order to implement the program, we will need to do some changes in our current municipal code. It's a general plan amendment, so we'll need to change our ordinances to include those residential uses that will be included, apply densities for those residential uses, and consider any other changes such as entitlements like use permits or design review permits as part of that.
Thank you. Okay, and then I'm looking at the in the housing element. My question is, you have the assisted rental housing, it's on A27, and Auburn has, it looks to me like a number of assisted rental units. Does that satisfy our requirement for affordable housing or low income housing? Because I know that a lot of these units are assisting in a very big way to many individuals. So is that helpful, and is that taken into consideration?
Sure, that's a really good question and something to clarify. So the regional housing needs allocation process is projecting new development. So to count towards our RHNA number, it has to be development that is constructed after 2021 or 2021 and on. So things that are already on the ground don't. But the way that they I want to say slightly take that into consideration with the methodology. So the regional housing needs allocation process is all about creating balanced communities and ensuring that there is, so for jurisdictions that have a lot of higher density or potentially more affordable housing, they get a higher allocation of above moderate or single family homes. So the process that they do every 8 years is to hopefully create balanced communities. So yes, they don't take into account enough of what is existing in our opinions, but it is, that is their process.
Okay, because I noticed that they don't expire, many of them, for many years.
Right.
Okay. Okay, and then going back to page 12, I believe it is. My question is on page, page 12, there's, it says that the city, where is that? Sorry. Oh, the city will, I'm sorry, I lost my place. Oh yeah, the city will, encourage the development of housing for extremely low income households for a variety of activities, including coordinating with potential housing with for developers. I guess my question is part of this, it might answer it. Are we going to streamline the opportunities for such development that meets our criteria here, that for ADUs and for lower income housing? Is there any thought to that?
There's a couple of programs that help to do that. Well, first of all, the state law has changed regarding ADUs. So there is more accessibility to actually doing them. And Tanya can speak about what the city's doing, but then also if based on AB 35 newer state law that passed, if projects come into the city that have a certain percentage affordable, like if a nonprofit developer comes in and wants to do a 10 or 20% affordable project, they are allowed concessions with streamlining of development that allow them to occur by right. So there are things in here that would help with affordable housing as well as accessory dwelling units. Tony, I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to add to that.
And I apologize, my connection failed and I missed part of it, but in regards to the ADUs, if I think the question is right, the city recently adopted, I think it's late last year, an updated ordinance. And then also as part of our program, we're initiating a pre-approved ADU design that will expedite the production of ADUs within the city.
That's great. And I am talking about other streamlining just new construction, especially in terms of meeting the criteria for affordable, low income, medium housing.
If I might add that there's so many housing bills that have just been stalled that are just lined up out there on streamlining. As Jennifer pointed out, there are laws that are going to streamline all of this. If somebody comes in with an affordable project, it almost becomes by right if somebody wants to do a percentage. That's why we need to get our ducks in a row on a couple of things, on design review, on having things in place that protect our interests, but also allow for streamlining. Because in some cases, cities either meeting or not meeting various types of guidelines. Literally, a developer potentially could just come in and submit their plan, and it'd be streamlined. It'd probably be out the door in 60 days. So that's why, as we talk about doing some type of specific plan or a PD overlay or something, we need to get ourselves in order so that we don't get caught by someone coming in and proposing something that we really, really don't want.
Yes, thank you. I think that's important as well. So thank you for that. Just turning your attention just quickly to the safety element. I guess, could you explain, I'm not sure who would do this, Eli, or the action that will be taken in terms of the climate change and what will be the action in that regard? In other words, will there be requirements for zero emission houses, more solar, that kind of thing?
No, at this time, what the state requires a safety element to do is to look at how various weather and climate related hazards may change or evolve over time. As conditions are projected to get worse in many cases, more frequent and more intense natural disasters and similar events. So the state requires that the safety element identify those potential changes and have policies in the safety element to try and reduce the community's risk. It doesn't specifically say what those policies are, but in general, those are not the types of policies that would relate to zero emission buildings or renewable energy or things like that. Those would not be part of a safety element.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have at this time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just want to circle back. John May, you had raised your hand. Did you have the item there, or was that an accidental raise?
No, not at all. Actually, if you would indulge me for one moment, I'd like to briefly discuss the ADU program that staff has been developing. So I know, thank you. Good evening, commission members and city council. And Mayor Berlant, thank you so much for having me. And I only raised my hand because I'm really excited about this new program that staff has been working on for the last several months. By way of background, as you know, we've had several of these joint sessions, and staff recognized the desire of the council and the Planning Commission to facilitate and implement these programs for affordable construction or affordable housing. However, staff also realized that we have a limited ability as staff to control cost of housing, or the state has already eliminated some of the fees required for accessory dwelling units, and city building permits, as we know, are lower than most in the region. So because of the limitations on how fees are collected, staff began to explore opportunities in how we can make design affordable of accessory dwelling units. So by design, it's the front end cost that it, as many of you know who've ever built a house, to hire an architect, an engineer, a designer, even a contractor sometimes gets involved that early, and you're paying for a project you may or may not ever do. So out of this concept, city staff developed an accessory dwelling unit program. And what that program is, briefly, I'll cut my presentation short, is over the past several months, we've been working with Placer County staff, who also received some grant funding recently for a pre-approved ADU program. And thanks to Tanya Ward in our planning department, city staff received some grant monies. We've been working closely with Placer County since last year, participating in interviews of applicants, making determinations on responsive bids and applications. And so I'd like to say that currently we have 3 sizes of a pre-approved ADU, which are in the design phase still. We intend as city staff to have these implemented by the middle of next year. And Amy actually our city clerk. I don't know if she can pull up my attachments. I just have a couple pictures. So essentially we have the first should be our 749 square foot ADU layout and kind of an elevation. And then we have a rendering of the same building as our next slide. There you go. So we have an artist rendering that we've been working on. We also have a 599 square foot ADU, which is the next slide. And then we have a 496 square foot ADU. So thank you, Amy, so much. I also actually have renderings, or at least one more rendering, which came in today. I wasn't able to get it in the presentation, of the mid-range of 599 square foot ADU. So the intention is that when a customer comes in to the building department desk and asks, how do I build an ADU, or what can I do to build an ADU? We will be able to provide them with 3 plans, depending on their location and size of their lot, of pre-approved, no plan check required ADUs. Essentially, they provide a site plan and the energy design, which is a few $100s, and they could provide a site plan that they can provide. And it's an expedited process, an expedited plan, extremely expedited, and a low fee process. So staff is really excited about it. The plan, again, is to roll that out mid next year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding that particular program.
Great, thank you, John, and definitely exciting. I'll quickly see if there's any council that has any questions on it, but I think, John, that this, while I see the connection to the general plan, I think it deserves its own item in front of the council for discussion, because I'm very appreciative of the work that sounds like you guys have put in and the thoughts. So quickly, any questions from the council? Yeah, Councilwoman Amar, go ahead.
John, that's fantastic. That's so exciting. Thank you so much for doing that. And I just think that's should be advertised. That's fantastic. One little question, and maybe you already answered it. So can a garage, do you have a plan for a garage to be converted?
No, these are all standalone structures, because interestingly enough, that has been the most sought after or most requested for information type of ADU. I think obviously the layouts can be used. These plans will be provided free to anyone who wants them. So they could potentially use the layout of, say, the 499 square foot ADU and put it into a garage. Part of the difficulty with these small structures is the layout themselves, is getting something usable and workable into a small space. So absolutely someone could use it. It just wouldn't be through that pre-approved process in a garage.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Any other questions on this sub item here on the ADUs? Okay, I don't see any others. John, let's definitely make sure we circle back, and City Manager John and I can work. I definitely think that at a later date, it would be good to just expand a little bit more on the rollout of these. So John May, thank you for taking the opportunity here. Councilwoman Amar, any other questions or comments on the plan?
No, I'm fine right now. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I just have a couple before we get to the Planning Commission. I just want to circle back a little bit to what Councilmember Spokley said. And I know just in kind of reviewing some of the other components of the policy sections, I know that we've got the portion here of continuing to work on the local hazard mitigation plan and some of the other planning elements. One thing though, and the chief and I were discussing this earlier, but I just wanted to kind of strengthen it. The city has spent a lot of time putting together a strategic plan, a wildfire strategic plan. And I know that the safety element is really a 30,000 foot level plan itself, but should there be some references to some of the local efforts that are being done, or at least provide a link back to, again, a document like the WUI strategic plan that really is implementing many of these higher level arching policy goals of the safety element?
Yeah, so Mayor Boland, Dave Spencer, I'm happy to address that. We do reference in goals under section goal 1, policy 1.4 with regard to working with our local hazard mitigation plan. And so if I were to describe it in a linear process, it would be the safety element would be the overarching, local hazard mitigation plan would be more specific, incorporating our county as a whole, and then specific to the city is the strategic plan that we stood up the better part of a year ago. And so that would be the sequence of events. And in this safety element, it does reference under goal 1, policy 1.4 for our local hazard mitigation plan. And I hope that answers your question.
A little bit, I guess specifically, Chief, my question is, should the city's WUI strategic plan somehow be specifically mentioned since it is carrying out a number of these higher arching policy questions, or is it really the other way around? The safety element doesn't reference it at all, but our WUI strategic plan at its next update should point back to how it's meeting the safety element policy goals and policies.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to get in front of PlaceWorks. Certainly, they're the driver of putting together the document. There is room under section SE-25 where we could add that as specific sight lines with regard to the strategic plan for that. And again, I'll kick it to Eli to confirm that that's appropriate for what you're asking. But I do think there's some room that we could actually cite the specific plans that we're developing or that are in play.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Chief Spencer summed it up perfectly. There is certainly room for mentioning the WUI strategic plan just as a point of coordination and as something that is part of the city's overall wildfire resilience strategy. But that is more of a strategic document than what the safety element is describing. So we would probably not recommend that too much of the WUI strategic plan be pulled into the safety element.
I get that, but what about a reference to it? Or would your recommendation be not even to reference to it, or is a reference at least a reference at minimum? Okay, understanding again that the WUI strategic plan is, in the shorter term where this is a 8-year plan itself.
A reference and some discussion about implementing the WUI strategic plan would be absolutely appropriate.
Okay. Well, so I would ask that we circle back to add that back in. I'll just one more time come back at I think that somewhere in our safety element, we have to at least identify, maybe it's not a specific policy under these goals because it can kind of vaguely fit, but I still think that Councilmember Spokley's questions and comments related to the federal land that border our city and the land management efforts that go on somehow need to be referenced, because fires don't know the boundary of our city, and we know that the highest risk in the very high fire hazard severity zone is everything to our east, and so we need to identify it. So I would ask that city staff come back and at least figure out a way. As I mentioned, I would make the suggestion as well that, and I'm trying to go back to that page, but there's a constraint section of the safety element. I think that's a very reasonable constraint. The fact that we, are not the landowner of the biggest wildfire risk. And so I would ask that we circle back to that. There's a couple things here on a couple, I guess, editorial pieces that I'm not sure are just errors, or if it was just it didn't make sense to me. And I'm trying to scroll through these documents are pretty huge, but somewhere in the safety element, and if you're able to help me find the page, that's great. If not, I'll just keep scrolling while I talk. But in here, we reference some of the historic fires. And specifically in 2014, the King Fire is referenced in the safety element, but the first two sentences are very vague and unrelated to the King Fire specifically. And so I wasn't quite sure if those first sentences were meant to be there, or if they should be at least removed and put down a little bit further. In all of the other sections that reference the historical fires, this first sentences, or even all the sentences, are specific to that fire. But in looking at the King fires, it talked about the Placer Hills and Forest Hill assessment. And again, it just didn't make sense to me. I'm trying to get there, I'm sorry. But just wanted to circle back to see if there's an opportunity for us to verify that that was purposefully put in there, or if that is something that just needs to be cleaned up. And I did find it is on page, let's see, page SE9 on here, 2014 King Fire. First sentence reads, Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee representatives from Placer Hills and Forest Hill Fire Protection District note, you know, blah, blah, blah. That didn't seem to apply, I guess, to the city of Auburn.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Thank you for pointing that out. That is language that does not need to be there, so we will remove that.
Okay, great, thank you. And just on, since this is our opportunity, again, not in a public way to point out, you know, point out areas, but I'm switching real quick, and I won't go to the page, and I can follow back up with staff, but the same thing in the housing element. In the section where we list the employers, there's several of the county departments that are listed twice or appear to have a different name. So I assume that is provided by somebody, but for example, the Sheriff's Department is listed on the employer list twice with 2 different amounts. And then there's a department that specifically says the Placer Food Stamps. And I'm not really sure that the food stamps is an employer itself. So again, I'm happy to circle back with staff. We don't have to spend time tonight, but again, this is my opportunity, at least with you guys, to circle back. And again, these are such, you know, minuscule little items, but I just wanted to at least bring those to your attention. Let me look at my notes here real quick. On the safety element itself, I know that in the timelines you discuss turning it into review. And I know that it says CAL FIRE, it's really the Board of Forestry and Fire Protection, but CAL FIRE usually provides consulting assistance to local governments. Has the CAL FIRE land use planning team provided any consultations with the draft? Because that program specifically is there to help make sure that safety elements are, when they get submitted, are going to be successfully approved by the Board of Forestry. So I reached out to CAL FIRE as well, but I wasn't sure from Eli or any of the other staff if the CAL FIRE land use planning team has already been engaged in a pre-review of the safety element.
Yes, we have been in contact with CAL FIRE's planning review team. We first spoke to them a few months ago about this plan update, so they do know that it is underway. They have not yet formally reviewed any of the content, but they have been providing feedback and ideas and, you know, general points of information for both the Auburn safety element and the Placer County safety element updates, since those are both currently underway and will require CAL FIRE review. So they have been a part of this process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Eli, for that. And then this question might be for Tanya or Jennifer or Cynthia, just overall in these 2 items. In the timelines, you specifically mentioned that these will come back in February or March after the state reviews. But I just wanted to understand the public participation process in this. I guess I don't think so, but is tonight the last night for the council and the public to make changes to the document? Or when it goes back for the adoption hearings, I assume that the public and the council and the planning commission can make changes, but how does that affect the approval process from the state?
Cynthia, do you want to go over the schedule real quick? You're muted.
Sorry. So the plan is to, with this round, HCD is wanting the draft to be available for a specific amount of time prior to submitting to HCD. So we have the draft that will be available from now until November 15th. So it's available then. It's still available for public comment, council, planning commission comment throughout the 60-day review period. Obviously, it makes our life a little bit easier if we have comments prior to submitting the draft, but that is still the review period, and we can receive comments throughout the entire process. So most importantly, the draft is available for almost a month prior to submitting to HCD. So we can incorporate anything at that point. Definitely call that out in the document prior to submitting.
So really, if a member of the public between when we agendize this meeting and tonight didn't have an opportunity to bring something to our attention that the council and the city agrees with, we have about a month to take that and then make those edits. Is that is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that as well, because it is a
yeah.
very
So you have the month prior to submitting to HCD. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I think, let me just look at my notes here. I think that was the last. Oh, I guess I have one more item, and maybe I'm being nitpicky and the rest of the council can agree or not agree. Policy 2.4, it mentions having reasonable response times and adequate staffing. And I guess I just had a little bit of concern about the word adequate and wasn't sure if maybe there was a more appropriate word like appropriate staffing. To me, adequate is your bare minimum. But if we're putting together a plan, don't we want to make sure that we're staffed appropriately to meet the various objectives? So I guess I would ask if there was a reason that we couldn't replace the word adequate with something like appropriate.
Sure.
Take that as a yes.
Don't see any objection.
Okay, great. So that would be my only change there. I know that the rest of the group will probably have this in the same comment, but I'm very appreciative of the two documents. They came out very, very well. I appreciate the feedback from the public that we got at that workshop. And I'll circle back for the council for comments at the end here. But I think there's a couple follow-ups. First, Councilmember Spokley, did I circle back with you yet? I think I skipped over your follow-up that you had earlier. So I'll start with Councilmember Spokley, then Councilwoman Dowden-Kelby, I'll circle back with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can actually address my comment related to one of the questions that Councilperson Amara had at the end during comment section, and I'm sure you're going to Planning Commission questions at this point.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Okay. So we'll circle back then in comments. Councilwoman Dowden-Kelby, did you have a follow-up question?
I did, because I didn't realize that we were going to talk about both elements at the beginning when you asked for questions, and I just asked my questions on the housing piece.
Yeah,
so I didn't really have a lot of questions on the safety element, but I did appreciate on page 190, goal 1, policy 1.2, requiring new large-scale developments in the very high fire hazard severity zone to develop emergency preparedness plans. And I just wondered if, first, I mean, what constitutes a large scale? Is it like a number that we have, or is it just, I just was wondering. I think it's a great idea, and I just wouldn't want to lose that opportunity on something that didn't constitute large. So I just was wondering what did that really mean?
I can jump in, and then perhaps Tanya could fill in if I miss anything. I think the way that we've used the word large in that sense was deliberately not to pin a specific threshold on it, and to make it more something that could be applied during a discretionary permit review process. If it seemed appropriate for the development, then an emergency preparedness plan could be required. So we've left it open to provide that flexibility.
And I appreciate flexibility. I just think it's a great idea. The council has talked about development, ensuring, for example, we recently had a proposal where there was only one entrance and one, it was the same entrance and exit. And, requiring that fire or that preparedness plan ahead of time would alleviate some of that back and forth. So, I mean, I appreciate flexibility, but I just wonder if there's a way to I don't know. I'd just like to maybe think about that a little bit more. I really like the requirement for the emergency preparedness plans. I just wouldn't want to lose that opportunity if there was a project that was determined to be too small, or if a developer said no, it's too small. We're not large. We're only 20 units. I don't know. So a comment. So thank you. That was all that I had, Mr. Mayor, on that. You had covered the issues with regards to our neighbor to the east, and that was on my mind as well. So we've already discussed that. I don't need to go into that further. Thank you.
Great. I was trying to pull up, and I'll do it while we do questions. The government code was just updated under Assembly Bill 2911, specifically related to wildfire protection with subdivisions. And I was trying to see if the definition got updated. I know CAL FIRE. I have good understanding that it is defined as 30, but I was trying to see if that was in the government code as well. But anyways, I'll check on that while I move to questions of our planning commission. So I will start by how I can see them. So I will start with, they changed. I'll start with, there we are, Commissioner Hyatt. I'll let you go first. And you are muted. Commissioner Hyatt, you are muted.
There we go. Is that better?
There we go. We can hear you. Yes. Good evening.
Okay, thank you. Just had a couple of questions. First of which is related to the safety element of the PowerPoint presentation. The safety element overview, and I think Eli, this probably goes to you. The question is your second bullet item states that the state now requires safety elements to be updated regularly. And having worked with a bunch of state agencies over my career, I rarely see the word regularly. It's usually annually, 5 years, 10 years. It's usually well defined. Is there a definition on this, or is this so new that the state has not yet come up with a requirement?
There is a definition. The state requires safety elements to be reviewed at the same time that either the local hazard mitigation plan, if there is one, and in Auburn's case there is, or when the housing element, is updated. So an update to either of those documents triggers a required review of the safety element. And if it is determined that the safety element is missing any information pertaining to new state laws or new science or information that has emerged since it was last updated, then an update to the safety element is then required. So local hazard mitigation plans are typically updated every 5 years. The housing element every 8, I believe. So those would be the approximate timeframes for a review and a potential update.
Okay.
And just to add to that, they must be reviewed. They must be reviewed when those documents are updated, but an update is required at least once every 8 years.
Okay, thank you. And then the only other comment I had was just a relatively small editorial comment. I know we didn't want to get into a lot of that, but on page SE2 of the safety plan, under the introduction section, there are several bullet items. The first bullet item talks about how the safety elements serve the following purposes. And the first bullet item reads that it protects the community from risks associated with a variety of hazards, including seismic activity, landslides, et cetera, et cetera. Just an editorial comment. I'm not so sure if we really want to state that it protects the community from these, but it more or less reduces the risks associated with these particular items. I would hate to have somebody come back at the city saying you have stated that you are going to protect the community from these risks, whereas in reality, we may not always be able to do that. That's all I had there.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions, Commissioner Hyatt, on that, or does that conclude it?
That concludes it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll move to Commissioner Vitus.
Good evening, everybody. I don't really have any questions. Several have been answered for me already. I do have a little observation. I'm just reading about the Capitol Hotel down in Sacramento, where it's going to cost $445,000 per bed, or $1,800 a square foot, to provide permanent housing for the homeless. And I'm just looking at our temporary housing locally and how effective that's been. And hopefully we can do something more like that along the lines of that same process here locally. That's really all I have to comment on.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioner, oh, sorry, Commissioner Vitus, was that all you had?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Willick. Nick, if you're talking, there we go.
I get through?
Yep, there you go.
Again, good evening. I think Fred's comments about that housing for homeless housing in Sacramento, I think has all of us kind of scratching our heads. I don't really have any questions. I think everything's been going over pretty well. I do have a couple comments though. I thought the housing element, at least for me, brought a number of surprises. You know, I was somewhat surprised about the incomes in our community, family composition, and the cost of housing and how many people, I think they said that were paying more than they should be paying based upon their incomes. And that was quite surprising to me anyway. It's kind of changed over the last 20 or 30 years, as well as the cost of development. A couple of people have brought up the point that, you know, what can we do to help, you know, to get people to develop in our community to meet these housing element needs. And I just want to say that the programs like John May was talking about, the ADU, and that he's working on, Tanya working on, I think those have immense values. And even though us as a community don't have the funds to give money out to developers, things like this, and also just being there to hold the person's hand as they go through the development maze has extreme value. And that's all I want to say. That's and compliment that program, and also compliment Tanya and her staff and everybody helping her with the housing element as well as the safety element. Doing a very good job. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that. Let's go ahead and open this up to the public. We have not received any public comment via email, but we do have a few participants on the Zoom. If any of the participants with us tonight would like to speak, just raise your hand. Thank you, Gary, and then we will bring you into the meeting one by one, if you don't mind. If you have a camera, turn it on, and then make sure to unmute yourself. Just raise your hand again if you have questions. And it looks like, Gary, we are in the process of adding you in. I don't see you on the screen yet. Maybe Gary is gone. Amy, am I missing it, or did he?
He
Gary,
just came in.
Gary, there you are. Gary, welcome this evening. Go ahead and unmute yourself. And if you want to, don't mind giving us your name and address, if you would, and then any comments that you have on this item. Gary, it looks like you're unmuted, but we're not hearing you if you're talking. Gary, are you with us? So, Gary, we're going to give you a moment here to see if on your end it's a sound issue. You can always just send it in the comment section, if you will, and we can read it. Otherwise, okay, I see you've unmuted yourself again. Let's try it one more time. Gary, can you hear us? Okay, Gary, I'm going to move to the next person and we'll circle back with you. And again, if you want, you can make your comment via chat, but we'll circle back. Looks like our next public comment is from Rachel Riddell Harris. Rachel, good evening. You can unmute yourself and there you are.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Good.
So I wanted to say thank you to everyone for all the hard work. It's really obvious how much work everyone put into this. I just had a couple of comments. First, about public outreach, I was wondering, it looked like there were some people that were there. What avenues do we normally use to communicate to get people to come to those meetings? Because it seems like I didn't know about it. And so I was just wondering kind of what normal avenues we use, and are there any other possibilities of expanding that outreach to try to get more people to come to those community outreach events?
Great, thank you, Rachel. Tanya, do you want to take the lead on that, or is Jennifer?
Sure.
Tanya, go ahead.
Sure. The PlaceWorks team might want to add on or elaborate, but I think in our attempts with our workshops that we had last year, we did the typical newspaper noticing. We've reached out. We had a flyer that we circulated. We used social media as people would come to the front counter and they would go through a permit process. We did kind of an informal survey of those people that were interested, or if they posed questions that maybe staff wasn't able to implement because it's not on the books as you know, as a law, but you know, gave them some insight that you know, the law may change in the future. So we've created these email lists of those applicants who weren't really anticipating having a conversation with staff about the housing and safety element, but through the course of everyday actions became part of a list. So, you know, staff reached out to those individuals, as well as working with PlaceWorks, coordination efforts with agencies that I think Cynthia mentioned in her outreach efforts, circling back to those people, you know, and inviting them to attend. So it's been kind of a grassroots effort, but obviously there's always more ways to communicate. And I think this time with COVID and some of the limitations, I think we were more successful than other of our neighboring cities in the fact that we started the process early enough prior to COVID that we were able to keep those lines of communication moving forward through this time. So, you know, staff's always open to new ideas.
Okay, I was just curious. It sounds like you went down to several avenues, so that's great. I had one more comment on a specific item for safety element policy 2.2. It's talking about solar and using renewable energy within the city. And I was hoping that maybe you could put something in there around it being cost effective, because it says that we shall implement these things. And I just want to make sure that we're really looking at what the most cost effective method for meeting those goals is. Because I've worked in renewable energy and some are more cost effective than others, but I also want to make sure it's not first cost, but you're also looking at the life cycle cost, because a generator may be more cost effective in the beginning, but over the life cycle of a project, solar may make more sense. And looking those like environmental costs might be also something to take into account. That's it. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you very much, Rachel. Appreciate your comments this evening. Gary, let's try to circle back to you and see. So you're unmuted. Let's see if we can hear you this time. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
You are very faint. I can hear you, but I can barely hear you.
I'm not sure how to turn this up without losing.
Why don't we try? And if I need to repeat it, since I can kind of hear you, otherwise we might just have to have you type in your comment. But go ahead, Gary. Let's see if we can make the best of this.
The first question, and it may be something that's previously been answered. What's the downside if you don't meet the 310 housing unit criteria?
So I don't know if staff heard that. His question was, what's the downside if we don't meet our arena numbers of the 310? Anybody from city staff or PlaceWorks?
Yeah, I can take the lead. So we have our job in the housing element is to identify land at varying densities, to identify enough sites, vacant land and underutilized sites, to accommodate the 310 units. the city is not penalized for not developing it because the city is not in the business of building housing. The city sets forth goals and programs to help incentivize housing, such as the things that we're talking about with the second unit programs and the streamlining and the buy right. So that the city, what's in control of the city is the governmental resources and incentives to help with the development and support developers through that process. So there isn't a penalty per se. We're doing what we're supposed to by allowing development, and the city's incentivizing it.
Okay, next question. With regards to ADU units, how many permits have been submitted, let's say, over the last, or application, over the last 2 or 3 years?
I'll just repeat that for the public's sake and staff. He asked over the last 2 to 5 years, how many ADU permits have been issued?
John may want to jump in. My recollection is I think there are 7 as of this year that have either been processed or finalized, and then I think last year was 2 and the previous year 1. I believe those are the numbers. So maybe 10 over the last 3 years.
John, anything to add there?
No, I'd agree. That sounds about right. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe that is maybe accurate.
Okay, next question. A challenge would be financing. Are there financing programs available to property owners that would get them through the hurdle of finding the money to do the accessory dwelling unit, similar to maybe Empower for solar or grant money from the state? Because to go to the bank and add $30,000 to $40,000 to your mortgage is problematic. So how do we increase the opportunity for people to get financing to do it?
Tanya, could you hear that completely?
Yeah, I think it was fairly faint, but I think I got it. I understand the question is what funding mechanism does the city have to help fund a private property owner who wants to develop an ADU, because going to the bank and getting a loan for $30,000 or $40,000 is a little burdensome. Is there any program that would offset the cost? I believe that's what I understood.
Yes.
And I think that staff has, tried to address the fact that we don't necessarily have funds to give away for that purpose, but one of the things that we can do to facilitate the offset of the overall cost is the program that John May has described is providing a plan that would alleviate the property owner from hiring an architect or a designer or even a contractor to put a plan together that can be utilized for that purpose. And obviously the labor and the materials would still need to be purchased, but that was, I think, the city's attempt on trying to offset the cost without having any kind of state funding that would, that could be, distributed or funneled through the city for that purpose.
Okay, regarding the, I would call it a standard plan. I think that's brilliant, and I, applaud the city for making those moves to do that. Question off the subject of ADU. The comment was made tonight about Airbnb. Would Airbnb be considered taking credit for housing element numbers?
Tanya, did you hear that? Would an Airbnb take credit for our housing numbers?
No,
it does not.
It's not a new permanent house that.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify that. Regarding homeless in temporary shelters, I know several years ago, it was required that the city identify locations that would be approved for shelters by right. And I know the specific location was Auburn Ravine Road. And the likelihood of any of those parcels being available for that purpose is probably slim to none. Would the city consider using eminent domain to take those properties and co-develop with a nonprofit?
Just to repeat.
I might want to.
I'll just repeat it just to make sure the public hears it. So the question is, while the city's identified the zoning for homeless shelters, would the city consider using eminent domain, partnering with a nonprofit group to put in a shelter within the city? So I don't know if Tanya or John, if John Dunleavy, that is, wants to take that question.
Yeah, condemnation, number one, I don't know if the city necessarily has the power to go out and condemn for that type of a use. Usually it has to be for some type of an emergency purpose of some type, but I would go out and say no. The city's not going to be condemning any property for transfer to a private property owner or even a nonprofit. I don't think that's in the cards at all.
Okay, it's my understanding the city of Truckee was successful in doing eminent domain against Union Pacific Railroad, but I'm not a legal guy, so it's just a thought. Those properties will probably never get used under the zoning that was administered by the city. So, next question. What can the city say about opportunity zones within the city limits and how we can utilize opportunity zones to enhance the number of units that might be built in Auburn?
So just to repeat, opportunity zones and how the city might be able to use them. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think the city qualifies for some of the federal opportunity zones and everything. I don't think we have any areas that are overtly disadvantaged. The opportunity zones, enterprise zones, all of those all have some correlation back to income and disparity and those types of things.
Okay, your answer, are you saying there's no opportunity zone properties in the Auburn city limits, or that the criteria wouldn't allow any kind of development for housing?
My understanding for a lot of the things, there's criteria. There's income criteria to fall into a lot of those things. A lot of those correlate back to federal programs for which you're able to do financing, tax credits, all of those types of things. Seriously, it doesn't fall into any one particular property. It falls within a zone or an area. Just because one property has a problem, that doesn't make it. You've got to have an area, and the city's overall, economics and everything probably don't get into that. But that's pure speculation right now, unless somebody pointed out a property or an area.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my questions.
Great, thank you, Gary. Appreciate that. I'm glad we were able to finally hear you. Want to take another opportunity to see if there's anybody else that is in our Zoom waiting room that would like to make public comment. And not seeing anybody raise their hand or send us a comment. I'll just one more time make sure the city clerk has not received any public comment via email.
Let me double check live real quick. I have not received anything.
Okay, with that, there's a couple items I want to circle back. Councilwoman Downing Calvillo, you had asked a question related to subdivisions. Our chief, I believe, has an answer, but if you don't mind just restating your question related to what's a large subdivision?
Yes, it was with regards to one of the policies in the safety element that stated that there would be a requirement for an emergency preparedness plan for large subdivisions within the high fire severity zone. So I was just wondering what exactly constituted large.
Thank you, Councilwoman Downey Calvillo. Fortunately, we've been able to do some proactive efforts in trying to address these issues. And so when we have a project that comes, part of the standard conditions is for us saying that anytime there's 2 or more structures, that is what triggers us to put in those mitigation efforts, as opposed to a hard number. That gives us some flexibility. As you know, you and I had some specific conversation when you were on the Planning Commission about the Collins project. And so for your assistance and help in moving that forward. And so, but as I say, in the standard conditions, when a project is brought forward, we have that element within there with 2 or more structures.
So then it might be prudent then to change that policy 1.2, because it says large scale, and 2 is, to me, doesn't constitute large. So just for staff's purposes, we should just be consistent. I don't know if we have to say 2, but maybe we just say, we just need to nail that down, because right now 2 is not large. So I don't know if we want to say 2, but.
Yeah, generally best practices is say following the standard conditions applied at the time of application.
Okay, so maybe if we can just make sure that the language is consistent then on that, for that policy. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I really appreciate seeing this in there, and that's a big issue for me, and especially with the newer developments, and ensuring that we are going above and beyond with regards to emergency preparedness for those sites, and really ensuring that I just don't want to put any further folks in danger, and doing all that we can to minimize that. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
So with that, I just want to circle back with the council on comments on this item. Again, there's no action tonight, but comments, changes we want to see. So I'll just go back in the reverse order that we did questions. So I will just start with Councilwoman Amara.
Thank you. I think I've said some comments. I appreciate the work that was gone into this, and I look forward to the completion and the input from the public, and the final product. This is a very, very thorough and well done project that you're been put forth tonight. So thank you very much.
Great, thank
you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilwoman Amara. Councilmember Spokley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would also like to thank PlaceWorks for the great presentation and fine document. A couple of comments that I mentioned, I would appreciate it if they were considered in updates to the document. I sit on SACOG as City of Auburn's representative, and we have taken up in the Land Use and Natural Resources Subcommittee that I chair, ADUs in particular, and other ways to create more affordable housing opportunities for our member communities. And one of the struggles that we always talk about are the regulations, and even with the streamlining of the ADU regulations, for example, there's still a solar requirement for the ADUs. And it might not seem like a lot of money, but a $10,000 to $15,000 solar unit on a small ADU might be the difference between people moving forward with developing these or not. Now, I know there's programs out there to help with these installations, but we're working on the regional level to try to convince the legislature to understand that affordability means affordable, and we can't, on one hand, pass new regulations that require new things to be installed on every unit that's developed at at the Capitol, and on the other hand, demand that we provide affordable housing. They're connected, and sometimes it would seem to me, and I do this for a living day in, day out, that there's a disconnect there. So we're working on this, you know, at the SACOG and the regional level. We're dealing with it here locally. We've got affordable issues in our community. We need ADUs, for an example, to allow for people to rent them out and provide that lower income, you know, household a place to live. And we have mandates from the state that require us to implement things that, are they really necessary? I get it that solar's a great thing, and I'm a solar believer, but there has to be accommodations for us all, and particularly our community, to get to that end result, which is affordable housing for our community. And right now there's a complete chasm between some of the requirements, not all, because some of the requirements have been streamlined and waived, and those have been helpful, but there are other requirements that are still there and still mandated, and they are a limiting factor on the ability to provide affordable housing in our community. So those are my comments. I do want to mention, and I know the council will recall that I mentioned this during the ADU conversation that we had when we implemented the updated ADU ordinance. The fire concern for me in our community is real. And we were talking about ADUs at our last subcommittee meeting at SACOG, and we had a commentor from, I believe it was the state. I don't know exactly which agency, but she said, yes, ADUs and the reduced setbacks are a huge concern for her department. And I wish I knew her name and which department she was talking about. She was reaching out to SACOG staff to set up a meeting. But she agreed that ADUs in high fire risk areas that are 4 foot off a property line, that means that in the back of your house at a common property line, you could have up to, I don't know how many square feet, let's just say 1,500 square foot ADUs that are within 4 feet of a property line, within 8 feet of each other on 4 corners. It's crazy to me to think that we have to do this because the state is telling us this is what we have to do. This isn't Sacramento. This isn't, you know, the Central Valley. This is Auburn. We have huge fire risks in our community, and yet we're told that we have to implement a 4 foot side yard, 4 foot rear yard setback for ADUs. I'm a firm believer in ADUs. I think they are a solution to help us provide affordable housing opportunities, but I still have a huge concern about the fire risks that these could bring. Now, there's not very many of them that have been applied for and permitted in Auburn, but if you think about the final outcome that could be, we could have these ADU units that are right on top of each other, and if a fire, God forbid, hit our town, those homes are gone. There's nothing that can be done. I mean, well, I'm not a firefighter, but I'm guessing that, 8 foot building to building and 4 sides and having potentially 4 units that back up and abut each other, that's a bad scenario in my mind. I believe the chief would agree with me that it's a really bad scenario. So we're working at the regional level to talk to the agency that has the same fire concerns that we have. Hopefully some conversation will come about. And maybe our ordinance can be updated based on a relaxation of the state mandate for ADUs. Again, I'm fully supportive of ADUs. I think they're a great opportunity for us to meet some of the affordable needs that we have in our community. But in certain areas, I think the setbacks need to be looked at a little closer. So with that, Mr. Mayor, those are my final comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Councilwoman Downing Calvillo.
Thank you. And again, I would just like to echo the same comments with regards to the completeness of the plans. It's the safety element and the housing element. I appreciate that. I know how much work goes into that. This has been a long process. It is a long process. We still have the environmental part to go. So, I mean, I am grateful for that. Actually, we're exempt, I guess, but I am looking forward to the concurrent plan with regards to the historic district overlay. So that staff had mentioned that we're working on that, because I think that that is also critical for us to, help us meet our housing needs as well. So with that said, again, I appreciate everybody and look forward to seeing this again after it's gone through its required state reviews. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Since this is a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, I'll just circle back with our planning commissioners and see if they have any additional comments. So I'll start with Commissioner Willick. Any additional comments you'd like to make?
No. Again, I'd just like to compliment Tanya, John May staff, as well as the consultants, and thoroughness and for all the hard work that they've done on these two plans. That's all I have to say.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Vitus.
Just like to say, echo Nick's comments. It's been interesting listening to everybody and how all the elements have come together to create the housing element. And I look forward to working with everyone as we go forward.
Great, thank you very much, Commissioner Vitus. Commissioner Hyatt.
Yes, no additional comments other than thank you for including me, and I look forward to serving the city and as a planning commissioner as we move forward.
Great, thank you, and yes, welcome. I will conclude. I'll just really quickly echo what each of our council members and commissioners have said. Very much appreciate this draft of the plan. I look forward to hearing back from what HCD and the Board of Forestry and Fire Protection via CAL FIRE has to say about both of those elements. I think we had some good discussion, so I look forward to staff's tweaking or updating a few of these sections that we've talked about. But I think overall, this surpassed at least what I was expecting to see. And I think that the charts that are included, and I know John, you mentioned the data nerds will enjoy the appendixes, but I actually think that you've made this a pretty good report that's going to be digestible by our average citizens. And while most residents don't really understand the general plan, I know I still struggle with that myself. I think that it being in a much cleaner version than a typewriter version that some of the elements of the current general plan are in just makes it that much more readable. So I know that just comes with the fact that we're in 2020, but appreciate very much the work that has gone on by staff and by place work. So with that, Tanya, I'll just look to you real quick to make sure there is nothing else on this item, and it's informational, so we won't be taking any action tonight. But Tanya, John, Dunleavy, anything else to add here before we move on?
Yeah, with the magic of the internet, surprisingly, we found that there is an opportunity zone here in Auburn. The state's allowed to designate for some specific things, specifically air quality, low carbon projects, rail projects, and transportation. And believe it or not, there's an opportunity zone here correlating back mostly to some air quality, transit projects, and part of our SB1 awards. So I think I spoke a little bit too soon, because there's the very specific opportunity zone areas for a couple of things. As a matter of fact, I don't know who's getting the tax credits on all this stuff, but somebody is, as far as some of the Connect card stuff that's come into Auburn Transit, some rebates on a couple of things from the Air Resources Board. It looks like Caltrans has done a couple of things. So something to do a little bit more research in. It doesn't say anything about housing, but it certainly does point to a couple of other areas. So another thing to do some research on, but as Mr. Mappa pointed out, for opportunity zones, I'm very certain that we don't qualify as an enterprise zone, but it looks like something from an opportunity zone is out there.
Great, thank you for bringing that back and verifying that. Tony, anything conclude here?
Yeah, I think I would just like to echo the fact that if the public wasn't able to join us tonight, that both staff and PlaceWorks contact information is on the city's website. We will continue to monitor emails and communication and encourage the public to bring forth their comments as we go through the distribution to all the agencies that were mentioned. That, again, we're going to continue to implement any kind of, or at least incorporate any comments received by the public. This is not the last chance. We welcome that.
And Tanya, just to verify, before the review by the state, it's about another 30 days that you can accept public comment. Of course, we will accept public comment at the adoption hearings, but as far as tweaking the document, it's really the next 30 days, correct?
That's correct. The next 30 days would be the best time.
Okay. Great, fantastic. Thank you again, staff, Tanya, John specifically, but Chief Spencer. I know we didn't get to Chief Canan or retired Chief D'Ambrosi, but thank you both for being on here. And then PlaceWorks, really appreciate Jennifer, Cynthia, Eli, Mark as well. Appreciate you guys joining us this evening. And again, good work by all, and look forward to the next steps of this in the coming months. So with that, I will go ahead and move on into the next items on our agenda. And that brings us to item number 5, our city manager report.
Mr. Mayor and Council, a couple of items. Obviously, the passing of Earl Isley is a big deal, and something that I'm going to put together for the City Council. Maybe it's a letter to the family that'll go out. Just in the name of the city and the council. Obviously, somebody who's been around here, very good business person. As we've been talking with the folks from Green Acres, they have quite a lot of nice things to say about them on that. So look for something to go out. And I think the mayor's going to cover some of the stuff regarding COVID and the Placer Shares program, but something I'd like to maybe just mention. And so last Thursday, the police department had their annual inspection, very nice photo opportunity for them. But then they had the award ceremony at the end of it, where they went into the council chamber and spread out all over the place and did as best they could to socially distance. But it was wonderful. Auburn police, obviously bringing in tradition, the way that they look, everybody, the men and women of the department just look sharp. And they were definitely a unit to absolutely be proud of. I think the chief, the lieutenants went through, it was a very thorough inspection. We kind of saw the chief bring a little bit of his Marine Corps out during the inspection. So I think it's hoorah for the chief as he went through and did the inspection. A couple of, in the award ceremony, everybody was there and it was very nice. A couple of things to point out. Officer Josh Egan received a presentation from the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Obviously, he was the hawk on DUIs last year, and he had in excess of 20 DUIs. And the head of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, who happens to be an Auburn resident, she was here and presented the award, and it was very nice. Officer Egan looked great up there representing the department. They also recognized Detective Adam Klein for being the 2019 Officer of the Year. They gave out various commendations, both A, B, and C accommodations. They gave life-saving recognition to Sergeant Joe Almeida, Officer Josh Egan, Phil Izetta, and Angie McCullough. And they also had a commendation for one of our dispatchers. And I often try and emphasize that there are 3 legs to public safety. It's the law side, it's the fire side, and it's the dispatchers. And the dispatchers are the first voices that people hear in the worst moments of many people's lives. And I have great reverence for the dispatchers, and they recognize dispatcher Linda Steinley for taking a call from somebody who gave no message and just left the phone open. And they went out, and our officers dealt with a very serious domestic case in this. Dispatchers not only have to have a lot of patience, but they also have to have a lot of intuition as to exactly what's going on. But last Thursday was a wonderful evening for Auburn PD. The chief, they really are a pride unit. They look super sharp, and it was a very nice night for the PD. So just wanted to throw that in. But anyway, that's my report.
Great. Thank you very much, John. Any questions from the council on the city manager's report?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to echo our city manager. Both Councilwoman Mackey and I had the opportunity to attend. And actually, in all the years I've served on the city council, that was the first actual inspection of the police department that I had been able to observe. And there is a lot of pride, and there's good reason for it. So well done for everyone. And thank you so much to the chief for inviting us to participate. I enjoyed it, and it gave us a good opportunity for you to showcase the great work of our men and women in the police department. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Chief, again, I'll also please pass on our appreciation to the officers that were, and dispatcher, Linda, that were mentioned tonight for their hard work. So appreciate their efforts. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to item number 6, our COVID-19 update. A couple quick things I just wanted to mention. Tomorrow we should hear from the state and the governor regarding our status and the potential of us as early as tomorrow moving from the red tier down to the orange tier. The governor today kind of hinted at a number of counties that would be downgraded and then allowed to continue to reopen. Nothing specific on Placer County. It's also hard if you go look at the numbers, the state's reporting lags. So it's sometimes hard to really follow where we are. However, our numbers have been meeting both the orange criteria as well as even the yellow criteria as of last week. So it's likely that we'll be able to move to orange, hopefully tomorrow. So more to come on that item. I'll just mention again, as I sent to the city council, but for our community, the state is changing the metrics again in how they assess who is in what tier. And while they've created the new 4-tiered color system, they then created an adjusted case rate process that takes into account the testing capacity. Well, now the state is adding an equity measurement known as the Healthy Places Index. When I turn this back over to the city manager, he can expand on how the Healthy Places Index affects Auburn, because he has spent some time looking at our census tracking to determine how that will be, which doesn't sound like it will be, we will have too much, but it's just another kind of change in the measurements. And so sometimes that's hard for people to follow. So just wanted to mention that. Also today, if you didn't hear, the governor made some additional announcements on some of the stay-at-home order restrictions, and specifically allowing for family get-togethers of no more than 3 families to be able to gather outdoors together. So a little bit of an easing of some of the public gatherings at people's homes. So that's just a quick overview of that. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention that I mentioned this last week at Medlars, but we had 206 businesses and nonprofits in Auburn receive grant monies from the Placer Shares program. And just to put that into context, that number is almost equal to what the city of Rockland, which is, gosh, what, 3 to 4 times our size, received. More than the city of Lincoln, which is at least double our size. We competed very, very well in that program. The county is rolling out version 2 of the Placer Shares program, and I'll let the city manager pick it up from there and discuss our continued efforts to help our businesses be informed of the second round of Placer Shares. So that's just a quick little update. Nothing new for the council. And again, I think I mentioned most of this at Madler's, but for the general public, that's a quick update. But John, I'll turn it over to you for any updates from the city.
Yeah, I know. Just to follow up on the mayor, they are going to come out with a second round of the Placer Shares. 206 businesses, well over $1 million into businesses in Auburn. That doesn't include. There's no question that we had more than 200 that went for the eats and drinks also. So I would venture to guess that somewhere close to $1.5 million are going to come back through that. The second round of the Placer Shares, we're going to get that out to the businesses. We'll work with Jackie from the chamber. It's a much smaller pot. In the second round, I think it's close to 800,000 that's out there. So it's time to kind of find some of the stragglers that businesses to get in and do that. So we're getting that information. I think it's going to begin later this week. As far as the grants go, it will be the same process, but something we just have to push. And let's see whether we get into the orange zone or not. I think that would be amazing for the businesses. As the mayor points out, the equity aspect of things, it's interesting. Everything has been based on counties, and now the equity thing switches based to census tracts on various things. You're starting to see some cities within the region wanting to break ranks and have a different evaluation criteria, because you've got some communities that are getting pulled down by some larger communities as far as what color zone they're in. And there's one very close to us that's not in our county that is saying, hey, we'd like to be out of there because their businesses are still in the purple zone. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see where all this goes. And let's root that hopefully tomorrow we might get into the orange zone. And the good news is that we're tracking in the yellow zone in many of the metrics. So we'll see where it all goes.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the council on the COVID-19 update?
No.
Okay, great. Not seeing any. We'll go ahead and move then to our city council reports, and I will go backwards this time. So I'll start with Councilwoman Amara. Any city council reports?
Not too much. I was into a chamber meeting, and there was mostly just the discussion on the candidates night. So really nothing else to report for me. Thank you.
Okay, great. Councilmember Spokely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I already kind of mentioned the SACOG subcommittee meeting that we had last week. We've got a board meeting coming up this week, so I'll keep it brief and report back to the council at our next meeting.
Okay, great. Councilwoman Donna Kelby, are you going to keep the trend?
Yes, just really briefly. The Auburn Endurance Committee is working with the Shack on the placement of a new tile. So that should be coming forward to the council, I guess, within a couple meetings. And also, as you'll recall, the council designated me as the voting member to the League of Cities at their conference last week. And there was really only one matter that we needed to vote on. And it was the adoption of a resolution that was geared towards Congress, urging them to amend Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996 to limit the immunity provided to the online platforms when they promote criminal activity to provide local governments with some measurable form of relief. And there was a lot of debate, several hours worth of debate with regards to the resolution that was put forth to the body by 5 or 6 cities, including Roseville. And at the end of the day, we did not have a quorum. So the vote that was taken was advisory only. And the vote was to support submitting the resolution to Congress. It's an advisory vote. It's an advisory action. But in any event, I did do my duties and I attended via Zoom and participated in that discussion. I also participated in an interesting workshop about PERS and the discussions of their percentage of return and what that means if they change that. So it's a conversation for another meeting, but it was very interesting. One of the members of the CalPERS board is also on a city council. So that was kind of nice to have that perspective, but that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And I have nothing to report as well this evening. So I'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. And as we have discussed tonight, I will adjourn in the memory of Earl Isley, who again passed away just at the end of last month, a staple of our community in Isley's Nursery. Obviously leaves behind a number of his members of his family who have continued to run Isley's. And I think the news is well out there that the Isley's family is ready to retire and passing it on to a new family-run business. And so while it's not Isley's, the Isley's name and the Isley's work, I should say, will continue in our community. And so I'll work with our city manager for us to do a resolution on behalf of Earl, because he definitely was a staple of our community. I know many of us had the opportunity to get to know him here in at least for me, the latter part of his time in Auburn, but definitely going to be sorely missed in our community. But again, his mark has left in Auburn. So with that, I will adjourn in the memory of the late Earl Isley. Good night, everybody. And for those of you, we'll see you tomorrow at Medler's.
Thank you. Good night.